Mike Owens here, and today I'm joined by Eryk, your boy Anders, who's back in action the 3rd of December, facing off against Kyle Daukaus. Eryk, always a pleasure. How are things with you today?
Man, thank you for having me, man. Everything's good, man. Just got in from training and yeah, feeling good and about time to eat and take a nap and then get back into it this afternoon, this evening.
I know I've just mentioned the Daukaus fight, and obviously I want to talk about that, but I want to start maybe with this weekend where you're facing off in Fury Grappling against Andre Petroski. How's this kind of come about, and kind of what are your opinions on this match against the undefeated fellow
Um,
UFC middleweight?
I haven't had a fight. My last fight was in I think May. And man, I really don't like a lot of off time. So I figured in between fights, I could do like grappling tournaments and jiu-jitsu tournaments and things like that. I used to do them a lot before I got to the UFC. And just, wanted to stay active without. Getting beat up. So I think jiu-jitsu and grappling is pretty safe. You know, um, this grappling tournament, they're in like no leg attack. So, I think that's like the most common injury in some of these submission only jiu-jitsu tournaments or grappling tournaments is like the heel hooks and leg locks and things like that. But there are none of those. So, I think it's pretty safe. And, then I'll compete in Worlds and a gi next weekend. So, just trying to stay busy, stay active, and kind of keep those reflexes, sharp.
It's good to hear that there's no like entanglement submissions. I'm happy to hear that because the last thing I'd want is either you or Petroski blowing your knees out. But what is the most scary submission in your book? What is the one submission you would never want to get caught with?
Man, outside of like a heel hook, just because they come on so fast, like a lot of times you see as soon as they grab them, they wrench them. So there is no time to like tap, sometimes. So for me, those are like the biggest issues and the biggest dangers. Arm bars, you feel the setup coming, you feel the arm bar coming on, so, I guess outside of like joint stuff, you never want to injure a joint, especially like your knee. It takes so long to heal. It's a weight bearing, like, your leg bears weight and whatnot. So you have to be off your leg. You have to hobble around, crutches. It's just a pain in the ass all around. So, I just prefer to not fool with them at all. In a grappling sense, like, of course, when I train, we train leg locks and do things like that. But full speed, live action, wins and losses, I prefer to not do that.
Yeah, 100%. From an MMA perspective, have you been impressed with Andre Petroski since he's coming to the UFC?
Yeah, I think anytime a guy starts out 3-0, I know he didn't, he probably would have won tough, I think. I think he got injured, I believe, and wasn't able to finish out the season. So, I think that he was a heavy favorite and, probably would have done really well. He's been doing well, submitted Maximo, whatever his name is. So, clearly he's got skills. I'm pretty sure he wrestled in college, so he can grapple. Yeah, what he's done so far is pretty impressive.
It's not inconceivable, given you're both in the same promotion in the same weight class, that this could be a rematch down the line in MMA. Are you kind of? I know the focus is the grappling match on Saturday, but is there any added intensity when you're facing off against someone who there's a relative possibility you could face in MMA in the future?
And anybody is a potential opponent, at middleweight. Yeah, I never say no. So if that fight comes across, on paper, then yeah, for sure. It's not a fight that I'm asking for, but it is what it is. If they give it to me, if that's what they offer me, then that's what we're doing. And I'm sure he's the same way. He probably has a no say no policy as well.
100%. I know you mentioned coming off your last fight in May. I'd like to very quickly touch on the Jun Young Park fight because that was a split decision in which a lot of fans or a lot of media in the sport felt that as though you deserved the nod. Now, I know you've had, I checked the record, you've had 3 split decision losses in the UFC, probably most notably the hotly contested split against Machida in the main event. Are the split decision losses the most frustrating in your book?
Yeah, I never win split decisions. I think I've only won one against Mearshar, and that's it. I think Park, Machida, and maybe Theodoro.
Theodoro, yeah.
Split. Man, I think I beat Machida. You know, I can't remember the fight too well. I think it was, you know, 3 or 4. You know, I think I won 3 out of the 5. I for sure beat Park. Theodoro, man, I could see how they could give it to him. Like, he was super active, and you know, although like his strikes weren't doing any damage, he was landing. You know,
Yeah.
so it is what it is, man. You know, anytime I go to a decision, you know, but man, I think you have to look at the demeanor of the opponents, of the 2 guys who fight before they read the decision. Machida and Park, both those dudes, like, their head is down, they're sad, they're like, boo, I just lost. But then the judges read the scorecards and they're like, oh yeah, I won. You know, so I think both those guys know that they lost, but you know, even outside of the loss on my record, you know, the thing that I hate the most is, man, I lose half my money in a fight that I won. You know, so at the end of the day, man, I think it's, you know, I really do try to go out there and knock everybody out. You know, I really do try to go out there and finish fights, but man, it's not possible to finish everybody, man. These guys are tough. They can take punches. These guys, I think Park is like 24, 25 or something like that. So he's young, you know, like the younger you are, I think the more durable you are. You know, you don't get more durable as you get older, you know. So I think, I don't know, dude. I don't know what to do, man. I had that guy up against the cage, you know, I hit him more, got takedowns, submission attempts. I don't know what else they want out of me. You know, if I could knock everybody out, if I could finish the fight every time, I absolutely would, and I absolutely try to. But man, that's just not possible all the time.
There's no doubt that you'd like finishes like the way you finished off Tim Williams all those years ago. I'm sure that would be top of your list. But if we talk about the Kyle Daukaus matchup, what do you think Daukaus does well as an upcoming opponent? What do you think are his key skills or his key attributes?
Man, you know, I've watched him fight, but I haven't studied him, you know. But just going off memory, like, I know that, like, I don't know if swarm is the word, but man, he like overwhelms a lot of the guys that he beats. You know, he gets in their face. You know, he doesn't really use his reach and his length on the feet the way, you know, maybe he could. You know, definitely when he gets to the ground, you know, he uses those long arms to, you know, wrap them around your neck and choke people. You know, so and probably what he does best is finish submissions. You know. I don't think his takedowns are that great. His range, you know, he like gets on top of people and like holds them against the cage, and you know, eventually does find his way to the ground. But yeah, I think he overwhelms and suffocates a lot of guys, but I don't think that would be the case in this fight.
He was quite a heavy favourite, if memory serves, going into his last fight against Delitse, but Delitse finished him off, I think, in just over a minute. How much do you think you can take from his last loss, that quite devastating knockout loss against Delitse, and kind of apply to your tactics?
You know, me and Delitse, we're not the same kind of fighter. You know, Delitse is also a grappler, so you know, he wanted to get attached. You know, he did like I think like out muscle him. Like he kind of like bullied him a little bit in there and through that knee. But I think Daukaus may have been like worried about like the leg locks, because Elise is known to like drop for leg locks and, you know, things like that. So yeah, you know, I don't know if the same I don't think I'll have the same game plan as Roman, but when I have my opportunity, you know, I'll pull the trigger and try to finish the fight for sure.
Probably this fight, in terms of where you guys are both at, it made a lot of sense in terms of booking it. But one thing that kind of surprised me was the date, the 3rd of December, because I think this was announced last week, so that's what, 14, 15 weeks away? What is it like getting a fight book when it's so far away?
I honestly hate these kind of fights. You know, there's so much time in between. There's so much time, like even before you like start specific training for an opponent. Like, I hate that shit. I'd rather them call me, hey, 2 weeks, what's up? Okay, cool, I'll be there. So, you know, or hey, call me, it's 8 weeks right now. You know, pack my stuff, go to Arizona, I'll be back kind of thing. So, I mean, but it is what it is, man. I know Mick does a really good job of like filling that schedule and booking fights. And, he's probably got fights booked all the way into January of next year, just knowing the way that he works. So, like I said, it is what it is, at least this time, like this time last year, I was getting ready to fight Roman actually. So I was gone, all the fall, and I came home for a week and then went back out to Arizona for like another 3 or 4 weeks to get ready for Muniz. And dude, I missed, all my kids' football games, their wrestling and basketball games. So at least I'll be home for the month of September to watch all that stuff and at least watch them play a little bit of ball.
100%. Am I right in saying that your family live in Alabama and you go and obviously train Fight Ready in Arizona? Are you separate when you're in fight camp?
Yeah, I live here in Birmingham, Alabama, which is where I'm at now, and then I go out to Arizona for fight camps.
Well, obviously your gym Fight Ready has kind of become almost a little bit synonymous with a celebrity aspect in terms of a lot of notable names, a lot of champions who've walked through the door, and that's kind of in a way headed by former champ Henry Cejudo. Henry Cejudo seems to be the guy who's gravitating a lot of people towards your gym. How Obviously you're kind of an OG of Fight Ready in many ways, but how beneficial is it having all these different styles and all these different looks coming through your gym over the last year?
Man, I think the best thing about having all those guys come to the gym is, man, you can pick their mind on like the mental aspect, because like Jon Jones, for example, like I can't fight like Jon Jones. I'm not 6'4". I don't have the wrestling pedigree that he has. He has like a 7-foot wingspan, so he can get away with and do a lot of things that I can't do. So, it's just cool to be able to pick some of these guys. And Wei Lee, she's a female fighter. So it's like, she comes from like a different style of, martial arts or whatever. Figueroa also, one of the bigger guys in the division, and so on and so forth. So we all don't have the same attributes, but at the same time, you can go in there and like, what are you thinking about before you get to the cage? What are you thinking about during practice, during training? Like, what do you put your emphasis on? And where, like, I want to know about like the mental, because I think there's something to be said. Like, these guys are champions and reigning champions for a reason. And it's because, of course, at the top, they all have all the physical attributes, but there's something that separates them from everybody else. And I think it's got to be like the mental aspect of it. Like, some guys really do think that they're invincible and they can go out there and just do whatever they want to do because they don't know that they can get hurt. They don't know that they can get knocked out. But Figueroa's lost. He knows that he can get choked out. Wei Lee knows that she can get knocked out, but then they still show up the next fight and still put on great performances. So it's just cool being able to go out there and pick these people's brains and like what is it that makes you great, and in between the years.
Obviously, everybody knows about your kind of football career before moving into MMA. Do you think that was maybe, when you're talking about the mental aspect of fighting, do you think that was maybe the biggest disadvantage for you kind of starting late in many ways? Because you obviously had the physical attributes, but maybe you didn't have the mental training, if you like.
Well, I don't think like the mental training, because I think like the champion mindset kind of transcends sports. Like Kobe Bryant probably has the same mindset as Henry Cejudo, who has the same mindset as Tom Brady, is the same mindset as Ronaldo. But I think like getting started late, I missed out on a lifetime of repetition of whatever. A lot of these guys that come in from wrestling, they've been wrestling since they were 5 years old. They're 25 now, so they've been wrestling for 20 years, or they've been boxing or kickboxing, forever. So how many reps do they have at throwing a jab? How many reps do they have, finishing a single leg or a double leg, or, or a Darce choke, or whatever the technique may be, it's like compound interest. If you invest $5, when you're 5 years old, by the time you're 25, it's going to be way more than it would be if you invest when you're 25 and invest for the same amount of time, So I just missed out on the reps. But I think the edge I have on a lot of people is I think that I'm a lot tougher than a lot of people. I may not have, like the crispest technique or the, best technique or, my toolbox may not be as deep as most, but man, when it comes down to it, man, that last minute of the last round, I'm still going to be there. Are you? So
I'm not.
Well, my opponent or whoever, so that's just something I kind of, hang my hat on a little bit.
100%, 100%. We've talked about Cejudo, and I think virtually 99.9% of fans don't believe he's retired, and I don't think he's give off the signs that he's retired. So I'll ask you a difficult question: if and when Henry Cejudo returns to the cage, who would your prediction be that he fights next?
Does he get an immediate title shot? I don't know. He's already beat everybody except for Funkmaster, Aljamain Sterling. So I do think he fights again. He definitely entered the testing pool. So he's getting drug tested or not. Guys don't do that for no reason, So I do think that he fights again. When? Don't know. Who? I would imagine it would have to be somebody in the top 3, if not, top 5, if not top 3.
100%. Talking about fighting, I want to move on to a different aspect. Is your acting career? Because I know you've recently appeared in I think it's series 5 of Cobra Kai. What was that experience like for you? Talk to me a little bit about how that opportunity came about.
Yeah, it was great. They the South here is starting to be like a big hotbed for movie production because the taxes and tax incentives are way better here than they are in California. So they're coming to Atlanta, they're coming to Birmingham, and they filmed a movie called Embattled with Steven Dorff. I don't know if you know who that is. He was the bad guy in the first Blade movie, which I thought was cool because I love that movie. And the stunt coordinators came to the gym for that movie because it was an MMA movie, and did some stuff there. So they got to know the guys, and then Cobra Kai moved their production to Atlanta, and that same stunt crew got on with Cobra Kai, and they were like, "Hey, we need this, this big Mexican-looking fella to go fight Johnny Lawrence." And I was like, "All right." And so, like, I had to audition for the role and everything. Like, I had to do the scene, read the lines and stuff and whatever, and it was cool. And I got the part, and took about 2 days to film my little portion of I think it's episode 1 or 2 of season 5, which comes out here like in September 9th, I think. So it was quite the experience, and hopefully I get to do it more.
Were you a fan of the original Karate Kid when it first came out? And if so, who was the most surreal character to meet? Was it Johnny Lawrence? Was it Danny? Who was the most surreal actor that you met?
Johnny Lawrence is played by William Zabka. And it was cool to meet him just because of his like personality in real life. He is Johnny Lawrence. The shit that he says, the little one-liners. I really wasn't a fan of Johnny Lawrence in like the first, like when he was a kid, like in the original Karate Kid. But then my kids love Cobra Kai, so I'll sit down and watch with him, and I would just kind of chuckle and giggle at the stuff that he would say, because like his character is totally different than the guy he was, in the original Karate Kid. And I was like, oh, this guy's funny. And I got a chance to meet him, talk to him, hang out with him, and I was like, oh, dude, you are Johnny Lawrence, like the grown-up version of Johnny Lawrence, and it was cool.
100%. Obviously, Eryk, you're on an interview now with a British guy. The Brits have just had one of the best nights in probably our MMA history, if you like, on Saturday night with Leon Edwards knocking out the pound-for-pound king. So I'd like to know, where did you watch the fight, and what was your reaction when you saw the knockout?
Oh man, I was right here on the couch, man. My boys were asleep, and I woke them up with one of those Joe Rogan, like, Just because, man, it was so like out of the blue, so unexpected, and dude, you just dethroned. I think anytime the champion loses and like there's a changing of the guard, it's exciting for everybody, you know. And I also, another thing that I like about the whole situation is the way Kamaru Usman is taking it. He's kind of giving props to Leon Edwards and telling him that he'll go to England to fight him, and it's his time, and he's just kind of accepting of the whole situation. A lot of people, like I'm reading online, are like questioning like how he's going to come back, from a knockout like that. And I was like, man, I think like he's going to do just fine as long as like his jaw or his chin isn't compromised. I think he's going to do just fine, man. He seems to be very like in tune and in touch. And I think I don't ever think that he thought that he was immortal. So it's not like, what I mean? Like some guys, they just think they're immortal and then they get knocked out and they're like, oh my God, like, and they never fight the same again. But I don't think that'll be the issue with Usman.
Which is the greater title comeback, Silva versus Sonnen or Edwards versus Usman?
Edwards versus Usman, just because I think, from what I can remember, Sonnen and Anderson Silva, like Silva was just, or Chael Sonnen was just in his guard the whole time. It was pretty like a boring fight, but the first round, Edwards like took his back and just ran out of time before he finished the choke. And then he got mauled, and there was a lot more striking, and there was like a lot more MMA in Edwards. And then in the last minute, I just think like the knockout is always more, and this is just me being biased, like I always think a knockout is more exciting than a submission, because it's just like it happened like that. Like when Sonnen got submitted, like you kind of saw it coming watching on TV. It's like, oh, he's got his hand, he stuffed it, and then it took him a minute to tap. And it's just the way, I guess both those guys, the way they set those things up, man, it's awesome.
You still here?
Sorry, I got a phone call.
No.
So I just think that, like, man, the level of those guys are playing at. It also snapped Usman's win streak, dude. He was finna tie Anderson Silva's. So man, there was a lot at stake there, man. And Edwards, after getting his ass whooped for 3 rounds, and then the stuff that his coach was telling him in the dude, you couldn't have written that any better, I think, for Leon Edwards.
Certainly not for a fighter whose nickname is Rocky.
Yeah.
If we turn the conversation back to yourself for one final question, I think I read in preparation for our conversation today. Am I right in saying you started training MMA when you were about 25? Is that right?
Yeah.
25.
Yeah.
So you're 35 now. So you've been in the game for a decade, which, as you mentioned earlier, there's people who start some form of combat sports training and are in it for 2 or 3 decades that you could be fighting. So when you think about what you've accomplished in the last decade in MMA, have you met your expectations that you set out to achieve, or is there still more?
Nah.
And if so, what is it?
Like, when I first started out, man, I thought that I was maybe probably a lot better than I really was, So, I, of course, like I aspired to be a champion, top 15. I think I could still be top 15, but I think the ship has sailed on being a champion. Just because, man, these guys are, 24, 25. There's a big difference. And I still feel good and feel great. Don't get me wrong, but the thing I'm happiest the most about is that I've made myself financially independent. So even when I'm done with the MMA, or when MMA is done with me, because that's the way it's going to be, I'm not just going to quit and leave money on the table. The UFC is going to have to cut me to get me out of there, but like I don't have to work again. Like I can just chill with the kids and take them, travel with them, and be more present than I am now, because I won't have to be at work from 9 to 5 or anything. Of course, I'll have other business ventures and need to do things to occupy my time, but I'll never have to punch a clock again unless I decide that I want to. that's the thing that I'm probably the happiest about with my career.
Well, that's probably a lovely way for us to end this interview, with the thought of, you being financially abundant and you kind of have a control of your own destiny after, MMA career.
Don't get me wrong, like, I'm not rich. Like, it's not like I can go buy a Ferrari and a mansion and stuff like that. But man, I could live comfortably and still be able to go out and do the things that I want to do, and the kind of life that I'm happy living. I don't need to conquer the world. I just need my own little piece of my own little plot of land to live a happy retirement.
Well, nevertheless, that's a happy thought, that one day, as you say, when MMA is maybe done with Eryk Anders, Eryk Anders is set up, and that's as I say, a nice thought. But it all starts again on December the 3rd. Well, it all starts again on Saturday in your grappling match, which I wish you the best of luck for, and obviously on the 3rd of December when you face off again. So thank you once again for your time. It's always a pleasure catching up, and I wish you best of luck in the upcoming competitions.
Hey, appreciate it, brother. Thank you for having me.
Before we finish, Eryk, how can people find you on social media, and any sponsors you'd like to plug? The floor is yours for the final word.
You can get at me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at Eryk Anders. Special shout out to NutriFX, the best supplements in the game, third-party tested, never have to worry about, a positive drug test. I know where everything's coming from and, what they got going on over there. And Rev Gear for all the gear and, the stuff, because it's kind of hard to do MMA without kickboxing, without boxing gloves and shin guards and things like that. So, man, special shout out to those guys.
Make sure to subscribe to the LowKickMMA YouTube channel for all the latest news, event previews, and interviews with some of the biggest stars in MMA.